So today we have another developer interview with Naoki Hamaguchi, who was the director for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where he talks about how the team built Nibelheim and why it was so important to get all of these details right. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button. And if you're new here and you'd like to stick around and help out the channel, you can leave a comment and you can subscribe. All of that stuff pushes out the videos into the algorithm and says to YouTube, hey, people are watching it, so I appreciate it. So this interview comes to us directly from Square Enix, where again, they sat down with Hamaguchi to talk about how they built up Nibelheim for the opening of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in the flashback. Starting off first, Naoki Hamaguchi talks about how they kind of had a head start when crafting Nibelheim. He goes on to say, we didn't have to do much to redevelop Nibelheim. We've gone back to the village several times, including in Crisis Core, so over the years it's slowly been expanded out. What we did have to expand massively though is the level of detail. He continues, if we just did a one-to-one replica of the original FF7 or even Crisis Core, it probably wouldn't resonate with people the way it should, so we had to add that extra level of detail. In order to recreate the Nibelheim as people remember it and give this part of the story the same feeling as the original, we had to add many extra details. We had to show things in a much more comprehensive way. And I'm really glad that he brought up Crisis Core, because I think Crisis Core might have been the first time Nibelheim was expanded upon even more. It wasn't just enter the town and then you go to the reactor. They did a lot more to add some life to that area, well, as much as they could, given it was the PSP version and there's only so much you can really do, but they expanded upon that opening area. They added some pathways that led you to the Shinra Mansion, and then they also had the actual mountain path that took you to the reactor. Now, it's Crisis Core, so it's a very linear game, so they couldn't expand super hard on adding all these different pathways and branching pathways. They had to keep it fairly linear, but even just doing that and expanding upon that stuff, helps build what they had in Nibelheim. It gives them a really good base to kind of reconfigure that spot. And then of course they did, get a head start on Nibelheim within Remake, because there are those very quick flashbacks to Nibelheim where we see young Cloud and Tifa slowly interacting with each other. So they did have that to build upon. But again, how they structure the world of FF7 in Rebirth, I think is really great, because it's not just here's the location, it's an entire region around that said location. And this is going to transfer over to part 3 because they have most of their world already created. Now it's about adding new regions like Rocket Town, Wutai, which I think is rumored to be pretty massive. I think Nomura said in an interview that it was going to be more of like a country instead of just a specific region. But you're adding those two spots to the map. I assume they're going to have to add a region around the Forgotten Capital, because we're just teleported there in the main game. There's Bone Village and the Sleeping Forest, the Northern Crater stuff, Icicle Inn. So there's going to be a lot more new regions that they're going to add to the game. And then once you've created those regions, you have to worry about now filling up those regions with intel, enemies, items to gather, just general stuff to do. But a good chunk of their work is already done, because half of that map was already built for Rebirth. Up next, Hamaguchi talks about the stuff they added to the Nibelheim area, like being able to play the piano and visit Cloud and Tifa's homes, and why that was important. Hamaguchi goes on to say, the reason we added these things into Nibelheim in the game in general was not because of a desire to add something. It was very much a case of, how do we make this village more real? How do we make it feel lived in and give it its own atmosphere? For example, there are little interactions such as Zangon's exercise class. That's something that felt real and right for the village itself. It conveys the idea that people are actually living their lives there. And actually, when you return to the village in the present day, you'll see that exercise has been carried on in a certain way. He goes on to talk a little bit more about the details within Nibelheim as well. For example, there's an empty lot at the back of the village where loads of cats just hang around and gather together. Later on, when you come back, one of those cats even has a part to play in a quest. By adding these things and even involving them in quests, we felt that it really tied together this feeling that this is an organic place, a living, breathing village. That's how we want the player to perceive it. And I absolutely love that they're doing this, because it's not just with Nibelheim, it's the entire world of Final Fantasy VII that was really beautifully and wonderfully fleshed out in Rebirth. Because again, it's not just about creating regions and then putting stuff in those regions that's going to give the player something to do. It's about making you care about this world. The NPCs you meet, the animals that you come across, like Salmon the dog in Junon, when you go on that really awesome side quest with him and you get some banger music, rescuing Tifa's cat Fluffy and bringing her back to Nibelheim safe and sound with her kittens. You're doing all of these fun mini games and meeting all of these NPCs and all of the aforementioned stuff I just talked about, because the developers want you to care about this world, because it's going to be in danger. We don't want to lose this place. I like this place. I like Sam and the dog. I like Andrea from the Honeybee Inn and Madam M. And even though he gets shit, yeah, I like Chadley. He's got a childlike wonder and he just wants to archive this planet because he cares about it so much. And fleshing out these worlds really helps the player feel attached to it because you don't want to lose it. Sephiroth wants to take this thing away from you and you can't let him because you genuinely love the world. You care about those people and it's really just beautifully done. Up next, they talk about some really awesome hidden gems, some Easter eggs, those fan servicey moments in Tifa's room in particular, where we get this really awesome reference to Final Fantasy VIII. Hamaguchi goes on to say, "We set out to put as much of that stuff as we could into the game. Certainly, you'll spot plenty of references to the compilation of Final Fantasy VII titles, as well as the wider Final Fantasy series. You'll find plenty of stuff that we added just to make dedicated fans smile." And the one example that they point out is actually in Tifa's room. There's a poster with an outline of the sky, kind of like doing an uppercut into the air with some dolphins around him, which, again, that is a reference to Tifa because of one of her limit breaks involving like the dolphin stuff. But also, if you look at the outline of that character, it's Zell from Final Fantasy VIII, which is so sick because, you know, he's another kind of warrior monk kind of player in Final Fantasy VIII, and a lot of his moves are kind of, you know, paying homage to Tifa, and he's got that dolphin blow move where the dolphins come up as he uppercuts. And seeing that poster is so sick because I loved Final Fantasy VIII, and you see so many things. There's even posters that reference like Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon and how they're kind of like built into the planet, so to speak. And I know in 7 Remake there was posters for things like Dumb Apples, which we were introduced to in Crisis Core. And all in all, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth doesn't just feel like a love letter to Final Fantasy VII, it really feels like a love letter to all of Final Fantasy. If I'm not mistaken, you know, there's a challenge called Blinded by Light, which is the battle theme for Final Fantasy XIII. And I think some people were saying that one of the songs that plays in the Chocobo Cup as you're racing, which is like this heavy metal chocobo track, is from Final Fantasy XIII. So there's so many different references here and there in regards to the world of Final Fantasy in general, and it just shows how much the developers genuinely love and care about this franchise, and know that people who are playing it who are fans are going to appreciate those little details when they do find them. And lastly, we'll end on the area that takes place between the village and the reactor and why they chose to expand it, and also show the credits the way that they did. Hamaguchi says, "We thought that rather than just fill out the area with battles, it'd be a nicer pace if we just had players experience the scenery, the nature around Mount Nebel, to see what kind of area it actually is. We also thought that we could have some conversations between characters and start setting the scene as well. Adding the credits over the top of that let us do all that in a nice and balanced way." And again, you really have to flesh out this world because it is a bigger budget console game. You can't kind of do what you did in Crisis Core by having these super linear and short environments. You really have to expand upon this being a big region, not just, oh, I'm in the village and then I hop 100 feet and boom, we're at the reactor. Building out the path to the reactor was great, and it's a really great way to set up the story for the character. And when you drop your opening title credits just during gameplay as your character is walking around, that shows confidence. You know, it's like, yeah, we believe in our game, we think it's great. We want you to see all of this stuff as you're actually playing instead of just having like an opening cutscene or video montage that does the opening credits. And you also have to think about the geography of that area, which I'm not good with geography, but you have to consider how big is this region actually going to be. And if it did exist in real life, would there just be the village and then the rope bridge and then the reactor? No, you really got to flesh out those areas. Think about the enemies that are going to be in there, the wildlife. And I really like that because as I was playing through the Nibelheim section, I thought to myself like, wow, the people that would have worked at this reactor would have left the village. They would have gone up this pathway, maybe been attacked by some monster. Some people may not have even made it to work because they were eaten by those grasshopper monsters. But all of the paths that you take make genuine sense. And then that rope bridge, of course, which plays a part in the backstory of Cloud and Tifa as their children, plays a part here in that Nibelheim flashback, and it also collapses. So Nibelheim itself really just kind of set the tone for what we were going to get in Rebirth, and really building out this world and fleshing it out with things to do and NPCs and making everything feel like a genuine world that people would live in and actually explore and traverse, maybe minus Gungaga because that place was a nightmare at times to explore, and I do not blame Zack for leaving. He probably got lost every single day just trying to go for a run. He thought to himself, I gotta get out of this place, I'm gonna go to Midgard, yeah, it's bigger, but I can probably navigate that way easier. So with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below, not just about the Nibelheim stuff, but in the world of Rebirth. How did you feel about the way they expanded the regions and added different things to do? And is it a world that you do genuinely feel like you care about? Because that's a very important thing to get people invested. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.